Okay, thank you guys for coming to today's class. We'll be covering author identity and learning to write, or learning and reading to write. So first things first, table of contents. This is just going to kind of spell out what we're going to do today, and it's going to be an introduction, a very fun exercise that I'm excited for you guys to go through, and then author identity, and then we're going to talk about some homework. So first things first is we're going to be playing this little game, and it's basically called Which One of These is Better? So if you like the specific poem on each side, do like the hand gesture that's associated with it. So if you like the one on the left, you can do like a peace sign, and if you like the one on the right, then you can do this sign if you can do that. So I'll read both of them, and you guys can just do the hand sign that you like. So the one on the left is snacking on this and that. My friends and I keep the party going, even when it is over. And then the one on the right is my brother went down to the river and put dirt on. So what do you guys think is better, or which one do you like more? You guys can do like the hand sign. Left one. Okay. Left one. What do you think, Allie? Left one? Okay, I have my preferences. They might be a little different than yours. But okay, I guess I should explain the context between the right one. So the right one is basically something that someone wrote in the aftermath of their brother passing away. So it's basically like about what it's like to have a loved one leave. So okay, yeah, I personally think that the right one is better. I think it's a little more interesting, right? I feel like went down to the river and put dirt on is a very unique way of saying or feeling something. Rather than the left one, I feel like doesn't make as much sense. But that's just personally my opinion. I feel like the right one is a little more interesting. But let's do another one. So this one, the left one is Barack Obama in the White House. I can feel the inspiration. Can you feel it? And then the right one is Away went a dull winter wind that rocked harshly and bent you said, Father, Father. So which one do you guys think is better? Left one? Okay. What about you, Emily? Okay. Right one. What do you think, Alvin? Okay. Yeah, I personally think the right one is better. Again, I feel like maybe it's just personal preference, but it seems a little bit more interesting and like um the way it uses words, like Bent you said, Father, Father is a little more interesting as well. And then our final one, so the one on the left is Whispers of a Secret Crush being unraveled. And then the right one is I, the Star God, take bones from the underworlds of past times to create mankind. So which one do you think is better or do you like better? Okay. What do you think, Allie? No, no, no choice?
I think I like the right one
The
better.
right one too. Okay, yeah. I personally like the right one as well. Um, but yeah, I like on a whole you guys had some different preferences than me, but also some other things. And I think that just goes to show that poetry is subjective. But yeah, I think sometimes we agree that the ones in blue are a little more interesting. And then my second question is half of these were written by elementary schoolers and half of these were written by high schoolers. So, which ones do you think were written by elementary schoolers or high schoolers, and why do you think that? Like, does anyone have any guesses? That's a real question. I was playing a trick on everyone. I'll just ask Emily, do you have any idea of which one wrote which?
I was feeling the ones with the italics because middle schoolers tend to be more showy. I think they're using italics on random words that don't really have weight to make it seem more important.
So you think middle schoolers are writing the italics and then elementary schoolers are writing the ones in blue?
My bad. Flipped it. The elementary schoolers are writing the ones with italicized, and the middle schoolers, the older ones, are writing the ones without italicized.
Okay, okay, interesting. What about you, Alvin? Mm, I don't know if you're, I think you're muted. I don't know if you're trying to say something. Oh, okay. I think the one on the right is written by middle schoolers. Okay, so basically you think the the kind of worser ones are written by elementary schoolers? Okay. And then Allie, what about you?
Hmm. I
For
actually have no
example,
idea.
if we take a look at the let's see, oops. Let's do the first one. Which one do you think this blue one is written by? Like a high schooler or elementary
Hmm.
schooler?
High schooler.
High schooler? Okay. Okay, so that was all kind of a trick I was playing on you guys. Basically, the reason why I introduced this exercise is that it's based on an article called The Average Fourth Grader is a Better Poet Than You and Me Too. So all the ones in blue were written by elementary schoolers. So the second one, in blue, this one was written by an elementary schooler. This one was written by an elementary schooler, and this one was also written by an elementary schooler. So I feel like it's very interesting, kind of surprising, right? But why do you guys think that elementary schoolers are better at writing poetry or better at writing than middle schoolers and high schoolers? Any guesses?
Nope.
No? Don't look at the screen. It has some answers. Alvin, do you have any ideas why that might be? No? Okay. What about you, Emily? No. Okay. Basically, there's a quote from the article that says, by middle school and high school, the average student has learned how normal people talk. The resulting language is underwhelming and predictable, the safe regurgitations of a thoroughly socialized consciousness. So it's not because fourth graders are some sort of writing prodigies, but it's mostly because when you're writing poetry, the interesting part is not how am I going to say this the same way that one author said. In the same way. It's about saying things that are first honest to you and your own experience, and then second, interesting. So, what happens when you go from elementary school to high school is that you learn those conventions of language, and then you learn how to kind of write into those conventions and write into those cliches, which is not your fault, but more so how we learn language and how we think to sticking to those ideas of what we know, right? So, what I really challenge you guys to do is to essentially be a fourth grader. And try to forget a lot of these traditional conventions. Try out things that sometimes you might fail at, or they might sound kind of funky, but sometimes you might succeed as well. And then at the end of the day, you'll be really learning a lot, and you'll be learning how to write like a fourth grader, which in this case is a good thing. Maybe not for analytical essays or like book reports, but for poetry, try to write like a fourth grader. And essentially just try to break out of your molds, try to learn and write in new ways. And then that's going to really help you be able to write with poetry, especially with poetry and also with prose as well. So, one of the most important things that I see personally when I'm grading, oh yeah, Ali,
I am a fourth grader.
you are a fourth grader? Then perfect. You should write like how you are.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think you might try to keep your way of writing currently, because when you go older, sometimes you'll feel like you have to you'll try to copy certain conventions and fall into those kind of predictable ways of using language. So you should really try to kind of be unpredictable.
Hmm.
But yeah, so one of the most important things that I think I see personally when I'm grading creative writing is that you want to make sure that you're actually telling a story. So the main problem is that for some people, there's a very fine line between actually like telling a story and summarizing a story. So for example, if you were to say, like I went to a grocery store, saw my friend, but he seems mad, so I chose not to talk to him. I got a pack of gum for my friend so I could leave. I didn't talk to my friend because I didn't want to. Do you guys like that writing? Or does it like inspire you or invigorate you? No? Okay. Yeah, so that's definitely an exaggeration on what you see, but there's a lot of instances where you're just kind of summarizing events. So you don't want to just be like, today was a great day at the beach. My mom and I got our stuff out of the car, then we walked down to the beach. My toes were full of sand, then I went to the tide and I saw the tide and it was beautiful. Because you can start off with a bit of exposition, but if you do a lot of it, it'll just kind of overwhelm the reader and then it also sounds like summary. So if you were to glow up or rewrite it, you could say something like, I saw Jonas in aisle 5, red and stony-faced. Well, it's probably not worth my while, I thought, hastily grabbing a pack of spearmint before racing out of Market Basket. And that's not going to win you a Nobel Prize anytime soon, but it's definitely a lot better than what we said before, right? Because you're not just telling things, you're really walking out into a store, walking into a grocery store, you're making it direct. You're walking out. But you're not just like saying blandly what you did, right? You're not saying your friend is angry, you're saying that he's stony faced, and you're kind of letting your readers infer that he's angry. You're not saying that he wants to avoid his friend, but you do see that he's trying to hastily rush out. So also make sure you're paying attention to things like rhythm breaks, line breaks, rhythm. And these things are also, even though we're not doing poetry right now, we're doing prose, you still have to think about rhythm and style. And you want to try to kind of vary your sentences. And that's kind of how you play with rhythm and pacing. So you can have short and long line breaks, paragraph breaks. And in the example, we have like a long line and a short line. So that short line is kind of like, well, and then in that moment, you kind of get a sense of what that the character is reflecting on something. But when you're doing that, you also want to avoid one huge paragraph. So do you guys know why you shouldn't have one huge paragraph or why we should generally try to avoid that?
It's boring.
Yeah, that's completely right. It's very hard for like humans to digest information on the page, especially when it's in like one huge chunk. And then another thing is that you don't want to make your sentences or everything start in the same way. So if you were to say like, I went to the beach, I got food, I got a dog, I think my dog is awesome, right? When you do that, it's very boring and repetitive. And unless there's a deliberate reason why you're starting your sentence that way, you should try to vary it. Okay. So before we kind of go into the main meat of the lesson, I'll try to ask you one question. And if anyone could just, or you guys can just say it out loud, or you could type in the chat. But what do you guys think is the most important step to getting better as a writer? Learning vocab. I think definitely having a good vocabulary, a very extensive one, can help you describe things better. Yeah, grammar not being too repetitive if unnecessary. Yeah, definitely. No steps to getting better as a writer. Like I feel like, yeah, definitely. There's a big learning curve as well. Sometimes you just have to write a lot of things and like be bad at writing. And then eventually just by practicing, by doing something so many times, you'll get better. But yeah, so like practice, not being too repetitive, yeah, reading a lot. That's kind of what I'm going to touch on. But yeah, grammar, vocabulary, everything is very important. Um, yeah, so those are all very important. I think personally, the one thing that's super important is reading. So I think you have to be, the important part about writing is that you have to read first. So writing and drafting and rewriting over and over again and being willing to improve, those are all very important, getting a good vocabulary. But you really won't get anywhere and definitely won't get anywhere quickly if you don't read. So, because reading is a very important building block for how we write. And personally, for me, I was a very bad writer for a lot of years, and that was mostly because I would only read a certain number of classical authors, like John Steinbeck or Fitzgerald, and I wouldn't expand out of that. But once you do, you kind of start finding, oh, here are authors who are kind of reinventing language. Here are authors that are exploring ideas, and you can do it the same way. So what reading does for you is that it really gives you a breadth of ideas to draw from when you're creating your own work. So if you're only reading like classical fiction or working in a very narrow scope of ideas, you're not going to really improve or be successful as a writer. And then another part or another important aspect of reading is that you're not just reading or you're not just skimming it, you're actually reflecting on what you're reading. So you can ask yourself questions like, what is the author actually doing? What do I want to do with my work and then my text? And then how can I learn from the author? So that's essentially how you can learn from what they do and then what you do. And it will really help you build a bridge between your ideas and their ideas. So now let me introduce you guys to the tree diagram. So the tree diagram is basically just a visual for what I was just saying. you kind of want to start with finding works and reading. So finding authors that you enjoy. And then you find all the works that you really like, and then think about the genres of each of these works and think about the themes of each of these works as well. And you'll often find that there are a lot of recurring themes across different authors' works. But the way that they tell those themes or the way that they make an impact on the world using their works is very different based on the type of author. And part of the branch is thinking about how their writing has contributed to history or to present culture. And then after all that, you also want to think about how does your literary work affect the world and how does it contribute to this entire artist tree? Because once you kind of become part of this, once you're writing your own works and once you become part of this tree of other authors, and you want to think about kind of how your writing speaks to future generations, like how these authors have spoken to you. Um, and then there's also something written above here, which is like knowing the who, when, where, and how. So essentially, that's what you do when you're researching these kind of literary heroes. So the who is like who are they? The where is where were they born, and then what's their background? And then the where is like how they grew up, what they do, how they might have shaped their work. And then when is, for example, what do you recognize from them from? For example, if I were to say like Jenna Ortega, do you guys know Jenna Ortega? No? Oh, someone? Emily? Okay. Yeah, so Jenna Ortega is from Wednesday, right? We know her from Wednesday. I think you guys know her from Wednesday. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so essentially that's where they're most known. And then the how is how are they doing the things that they're doing? How are they significant? And that's probably the most important part because when you talk about their influences, how they're acting, that's kind of where you're talking about their influences, how they're acting as an influence in the literary world, and then what themes they're using. Okay, so here are two more trees, a lot more trees. So this is basically where you do the link between you and the author. So it's really an exploration of how you are related to the author, and how you can kind of explore the same themes. So mostly you'll be looking at the background and influence of you and your author, the important works that have influenced you, and the important works that have influenced your author's worldview and how they capture the world versus your worldview. And then finally, do the ideas in your chosen author's works inform their authentic voice versus how do the ideas in your work inform your authentic voice? And all of this kind of sounds very vague, but it's about how theme shapes your writing. So, for example, if I'm writing a short story about death, it's going to be a lot different than writing a short story about returning to your home. They could be kind of similar, but in general, it's about how your author's works can really shape how you approach the text. And then thinking about not just these factors, but how you and your author overlap, and therefore you can really use a lot of your author's ideas. So there's a lot of stuff on this tree diagram, a lot of factors you can consider, and a lot of arrows as well. So it looks kind of confusing, but the main gist of it is that you should observe your author's background, um, kind of observe how they were influenced, observe what they want from the world, and then you how they use the themes to inform that, and then observe yourself. And so it's a reflection of the author, but also on yourself. And what you really want to make sure you're doing is that when you're reading, you're not just looking at it be like, oh, I'll remember that, right? You're really reflecting and interrogating the author situation versus your situation because through reflection, that will really help you with your own writing. Okay, and then I'll kind of tell you guys where can I find good writing, where you can find good writing, right? So you can always go to literary magazines. They're really good ones like the Kenyon Review, Adroit Journal, Poetry, Bennington Review, Rust and Moth. And then I also yeah, Rust and Moth is one of my favorites. And then there are a lot more you can just Google and kind of you can go down a rabbit hole. If you find an author you really like in one literary magazine, you can see where they're published in other ones and see and read more of their work. So going through literary magazines, they always have great stuff. And then for competitions specifically, especially for competitions that you kind of plan to do yourself, definitely look at the winners of those competitions. Like, for example, when I was doing Scholastic, I would look at the Scholastic Arts and Writing Gallery and really, I'd read all the works on there. And it's a really great way to see kind of what wins these competitions, what the judges are looking for. And then for Foil as well, Young Arts, those are all competitions that kind of release the winners in anthologies. So if you want, that's definitely a great way, especially if you're trying to look at competitions. Um, But yeah, and then also branching out from one author to find others. So this can be done with a quick Google search. If you read something that you really like, you can Google that author and then kind of spiral around until you kind of find another author that you like. And that can get you into a lot of really good writing. And then I don't know, this might be kind of late for you guys or later on for you guys, but the AP Literature book list has a lot of good writing. Um, Not all the books on the list will be what you want to read, but there are generally a really some fun and really good reads as well. And there's also peer recommendations or teacher recommendations, so your librarians probably know a ton. Anything from Toni Morrison, her main works are Beloved and Song of Solomon. Those are both awesome. I actually have, I actually have Beloved by Toni Morrison right here. So you can just get it at your local library. And that's a really great way to kind of branch out. And I really love Toni Morrison as well. And I can quickly demonstrate the author thing, like how you can search and find your own authors. So let me stop sharing for a second, and I'll just like show you um, how you might go about kind of like searching things. Okay, do you guys see my screen? Okay. So if you were to say like Ocean Vuong, um, say you really liked Ocean Vuong's poetry, for example, you can see like first you can read his all of his other works. So those are really great. Otherwise, you could say like Ocean Vuong, um, similar authors. And then from there, if you look, you can see there's a few other similar authors. Kaveh Akbar, he actually has written a really good book so far. It's called Martyr. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Have you heard of Martyr? No. I think a lot of my friends read this book and they said it's really good. So maybe you guys want to try that book if you like Ocean Vuong. But yeah, so you can go kind of, and then you can kind of go into a rabbit hole. Kaveh Akbar, similar authors. And basically, any books or any specific authors you like, you can just kind of keep going and looking at authors that are similar. So, do you guys have a specific author in mind that you guys specifically like?
Tweety Sutherland.
How do you spell that?
T Tui.
Tweety Sutherland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, Wings of Fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's I remember. Okay, let's see similar authors. Mm, have you heard of any of these authors? Aaron Hunter, Brandon Mull.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
You know this guy,
Oh,
right?
yeah, Rick Riordan.
Percy Jackson. Okay. Yeah, so you can kind of
I didn't read some of his books already.
Yeah, have maybe the Warrior series. I've also heard of those. Um, Percy Jackson. Yeah. So you can kind of just go onto a rabbit hole if you have very specific author or very specific style that you like, then this is a good way. You can just simply search them on Google. Okay, so let me stop sharing and okay. So yeah. And then Goodreads, you could also go to Goodreads. I don't know, have any of you guys used Goodreads before or have Goodreads? A little, yeah. So, basically, Goodreads is a way that you can track what books you're reading and also search them up and look at book reviews. Um, my friend uses it. Yeah. Yeah, I use it too. I think it's very fun if you want to kind of track how many books you're reading in a year. And it also gives you good recommendations because whenever you finish one book, it'll recommend other books that are similar to that. So that's also a way if you want to kind of get more into reading. And then you can also join a community of writers, whether it's a Discord group or like in person, that really allows you to kind of branch out and meet other writers. And then writing camps are a really great way to do that as well. I don't know if you guys have heard of Kenyan Young Writers or Iowa Young Writers. Have you heard of those writing camps?
No.
Okay, you might hear them when you go to high school, but those are two very prestigious and competitive writing camps to get into. But if you do get into those are great ways to kind of um, meet other writers that are similar to you and also just really good at writing. And I know some of people, after they go to those camps, they create their own literary magazines from alumni of those camps. So it's definitely a great way to kind of make new friends in the writing community. Okay. So now let's talk about author identity. So author identity is essentially the sum of themes. So um, it's essentially the themes, ideas, and different influences that make up who you are as an author. And in this class, we broke it up into theme, motif slash idea, and voice and style. So it's essentially the tree that we just saw. And we asked ourselves, like, what are your influences? How does that shape who you are today? And then themes are the big ideas that will kind of drive your work and writing. So can you guys think of some common themes that you usually write about?
Mm,
You can just type in the chat or just like say it out loud. Any broad or major themes? Mystery. That's a fun theme. Does no one else write about any themes? Nonfiction? Yeah, that's a pretty broad genre. Okay, so basically, what I wanted to say about themes is that it's very important to kind of stay true to your themes and stay true to your obsession. Like, if you were to talk about friendship, or maybe you're talking about, people lo not loving you back and writing about poetry, you can do all that and it's fine. But the caveat is that some competitions will prefer certain themes over others. And one specific competition I can think of off the top of my head that does that is Scholastic Arts and Writing. Um, and keep in mind that it's a family publisher and it's hosted and sponsored by Scholastic, the company. And they really, really, really like exploration of family, love, and identity. And almost every year there will be an obligatory Asian culture piece that wins. So like if you write something that's like an Asian culture piece and I think I've written one before and it's really bad. But it's still won because it was, I think, because of the theme specifically. So you kind of want to think about, I guess, like not try to like change your theme, but keep that in mind when you're writing for competitions. And there's also another competition called Columbia Chicago. And I think 1 year, all three of their winners were on culture. So definitely some competitions prefer certain themes over others. And then other competitions don't care. So stay true to your obsessions, whether it's family, love, intersections. Maybe you're female, but also East Asian. And thinking about kind of those intersections and exploring the gray area between the complexities of them. You can think about memory, identity, translation, how things change when they're translated, whether between language or between generations. And even the errors in translation, that's a really fascinating idea. Um, Change. Basically, stay true to what you love, what you're obsessed with. And unless you're writing about writing for Scholastic, then write about family trauma because that's how you do it. But not really. Just try to stay true to what you're obsessed with and what you like writing about. And then motifs and ideas. These are basically repeating ideas that follow throughout a work. So these are additive. They contribute to the significance of key ideas and themes. So if your theme or main point is memories of the past, some interesting motifs could be basically, wait, what do you guys think would some interesting motifs if someone's thinking of like um, of the past or like things that happened before? You guys can type in the chat.
mm,
Ancestry. Yeah. Motifs can just be like anything, like an object, reflecting on a war or event. Yep. Yeah. So relationships. Okay, so if anyone is questioning that, like the definition of motifs, basically motifs are recurring symbols that show up and contribute to the theme. So a really cool thing that authors do sometimes that really hits the theme home is starting off with a symbol that nobody really picks up on. I see chat. Artifacts. Yeah, just like very specific kind of concrete things that like repeat over and over. And then, so for example, if you had like a very innocent thing in the beginning that no one really picks up on, and then in the end, after everything, it just comes back, and then suddenly it makes a lot more sense. So that's kind of when you actually attach meaning to a symbol. And then Toni Morrison actually does a really great job of like talking about one thing and then being like, oh, you forgot about that thing, and then now it's back. Um, can it be a quote? I think, yeah, it could be a quote. Anything could be a motif as long as it's like can be used as a symbol and also could be repeated, but it can almost like at the end, it after going through something, it changes its meaning in a way. Um, but yeah, so interesting motifs. Yeah, so for example, if you were going to talk about death or the past as your theme, you could talk about like old faded photographs. That's kind of cliche, but if you make it something very small, very specific, and kind of very niche, then that can be a really good way. Um, you could do that. And I feel like whenever a character is like missing their past or they're like longingly pressing their hands to like a picture of their dead wife, or old photos, a lot of the times it's like antiquities, I think like someone mentioned, of old objects. Um, for example, if the character's wife had like an old bracelet or an old necklace or something, that can be a motif or something like that. Um, Flowers. There's like a something called Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And then dandelions were kind of the motif in that. And dandelions literally act as a way for the author to remember and bottle up the past. And literally that's because he's making wine out of dandelions. Places could also be really great motifs. It could be like a house on a hill. Um, and a house is actually a really good example because it can be tethered to land, right? And you're walking through the house, and whatever age you are, you can kind of give a sense of the people who once lived there, whether it was yourself or a family member. Yeah, letters, aging. So you guys all came up with great examples before of motifs. Okay, so finally we have style and voice. So this is kind of harder, and I won't expect you guys to grasp it because there are so many things within style and voice. It's one of those things that you can't just add in this and add in that. It's more of like a subtle thing. So it's harder, but it's very important to think about. And essentially, what it is how the author converses with their audience. So this can be done with tone, sentence length, rhetoric. And we talked about pacing. So that's like using short and long sentences and also line breaks. And that actually contributes to voice. And really keep in mind cliches. I'm not saying that you're bad or they're bad if y and you shouldn't use them at all. But if you want to kind of write something or try something fresh, some things people do a lot in writing is a very overly naive child kind of witnessing something horrible. Like my dad didn't come home today. I hope he comes home someday. Or like my dad went to go get the milk. He hasn't been back. Or having someone who's very sad. Like I wept as I held his falling body in my arms. And just keep in mind that there are fresher ways to kind of think about it, and there's really more nuanced ways to go about with your voice. So, if you want a more concrete example of voice, think about what emotions does the author make you feel. So, if I'm reading a very sad voice or a sad piece, I might say that the author's voice is like somber or like reflective. And if I'm reading a very fast action piece, I might say the author's voice is like humorous or fast-paced. So now we're going to do a quick kind of popcorn reading of this it's like a shorter piece, memoir kind of. Um let me stop sharing my screen. Okay. I really like this piece, so I'm excited for you guys to see it. Okay. Do you guys see my screen? Okay. So this piece is called Love Lost and Kimchi. Um yeah, so you guys can like popcorn read. Does everyone know what popcorn reading is? Okay. Does anyone want to start off? Emily, do you want to start off?
I'm so tired of white guys on TV telling me what to eat. I'm tired of Anthony Bourdain testing the waters of Korean cuisine to report back that not only will our food not kill you, it actually tastes good. I don't care how many times you've traveled to Thailand, I won't listen to you. Just like the white kids wouldn't listen to me, the half Korean girl defending the red squid tentacles in my lunchbox. The same kids who teased me relentlessly back then are the ones who now celebrate our cuisine as the next big thing.
Perfect. Okay, Allie, do you want to go?
I'll do it. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in a small college town that was about 90% white. In my adolescence, I hated being half Korean. I wanted people to stop asking, "Where are you really from?" I could barely speak the language and didn't have any Asian friends. There was nothing about the that felt Korean, except when it came to food. At home, my mom always prepared a Korean dinner for herself and an American dinner for my dad. Despite the years he lived in Seoul, selling cars to the military and courting my mom at the Naija hotel where she worked, my dad is still a white boy from Philadelphia. He is an adventurous eater. Ask him about steamed dog meat, but his comfort foods are meat and potatoes.
Okay, Alvin, do you want to read? Oh, Alvin doesn't have a microphone. Okay. Okay, then I'll take Alvin's spot then. So each night my mom prepared two meals. She'd steam broccoli and grill dad salmon while boiling jjigae and plating little side dishes known as banchan. When our rice cooker announced in its familiar robotic voice, "Your delicious white rice will be ready soon," the three of us would sit down to a wondrous mashup of East and West. I'd create true fusion one mouthful at a time, using chopsticks to eat strips of T-bone and codfish eggs drenched in sesame oil, all in one bite. I liked my baked potatoes with fermented chili paste, my dried cuttlefish with mayonnaise. There's a lot to love about Korean food, but what I love most is its extremes. If a dish is supposed to be served hot, it's scalding. If it's meant to be served fresh, it's still moving. Stews are served in heavy stone pots that hold the heat. Crack an egg on top and it will poach before your eyes. Cold noodle soups are served in bowls made of actual ice. Okay, Emily.
By my late teens, my craving for Korean staples started to eclipse my desire for American ones. My stomach ached for al tong and, sorry, how do you pronounce that?
I'm not too sure. You can just say it.
Kalgukso. On a long family vacation with no Korean restaurant in sight, my mom and I passed up hotel buffets in favor of microwave rice and roasted seaweed in our hotel room. And when I lost my mother to a very sudden, brief, and painful fight with cancer 2 years ago, Korean food was my comfort food. She was diagnosed in 2014. That May, she'd gone to the doctor for a stomach ache, only to learn that she had a rare squamous cell carcinoma,
Carson.
stage 4, and that it had spread. Our family was blindsided.
Okay. Um, Allie?
I moved back to Oregon to help my mother through chemotherapy. Over the next 4 months, I watched her slowly disappear. The treatment took everything: her hair, her spirit, her appetite. It burned sores on her tongue. Our table, once beautiful and unique, became a battleground of protein powders and tasteless porridge. I crushed Vicodin into ice cream.
Okay. Dinner time was a calculation of calories, an argument to get anything down. The intensity of Korean flavors and spices became too much for her to stomach. She couldn't even eat kimchi. I began to shrink along with my mom, being so consumed with her health that I had no desire to eat. Over the course of her illness, I lost 15 pounds. After 2 rounds of chemo, she decided to discontinue treatment, and she died 2 months later.
As I struggled to make sense of the loss, my memories often turned to food. When I came home from college, my mom used to make gabasam, Korean short rib with lettuce wraps. She'd have marinated the meat 2 days before I'd even gotten on the plane, and she'd buy my favorite radish kimchi a week ahead to make sure it was perfectly fermented. Then there were childhood summers when she brought me to Seoul. Jet lagged and sleepless, we'd snacked on homemade banchan in the blue dark of Grandma's humid kitchen while my relatives slept. My mom would whisper, "This is how I know you're a true Korean."
But my mom never really taught me how to make Korean food. When I would call to ask how much water to use for rice, she'd always say, fill it until it reaches the back of your hand. When I'd beg her for When I begged for her galbi recipe, she gave me a Hazaard ingredient list and approximate measurements and told me to keep tasting it until it tastes just like mom's.
After my mom died, I was so haunted by the trauma of her illness, I worried I'd never remember her as the woman she had been, stylish and headstrong, always speaking her mind. When she appeared in my dreams, she was always sick. Then I started cooking. When I first searched for Korean recipes, I found few resources, and I wasn't about to trust Bobby Flay's Korean taco monstrosity or his clumsy chicken slaw, kimchi slaw. Then, among videos of Oriental chicken salads, I found the Korean YouTube personality Mangchi. There she was, peeling the skin off an Asian pear just like my mom. In one long strip, index fingers steadied on the back of the knife. She cut galbi with my mom's ambidextrous precision, positioning the chopsticks in her right hand while snipping bite-sized pieces with her left. A Korean woman uses kitchen scissors the way a warrior brandishes a weapon.
I've been looking for a recipe for jakkuk, a porridge made from pine nuts and soaked rice. It's a dish for the sick or elderly, and was the first food I craved when my feelings of shock and loss finally made way for hunger. I follow Mangchen's instructions carefully, soaking the rice, breaking off the tips of pine nuts. Memories of my mother emerged as I worked, the way she stood in front of her little red cutting board, the funny intonations of her speech.
For many, Julia Child is the hero who brought beef bourguignon into the era of TV dinner. She showed home cooks how to scale the culinary mountain. Mengchi did this for me a year after my mom died. My kitchen filled with jars containing cabbage, cucumbers, and radishes in various stages of fermentation. I hear my mom's voice. Never fall in love with anyone who doesn't like kimchi. They'll always smell it coming out of your pores.
I've spent over a year cooking with Mangchi. Sometimes I pause and rewind to get the steps exactly right. Other times I'll let my hands and taste buds take over from memory. My dishes are never exactly like my mom's, but that's okay. They're still a delicious tribute. The more I learn, the closer I feel to her. One night long ago, I had a dream. I was watching my mother as she stuffed giant heads of Napa cabbage into earthenware jars. She looked healthy and beautiful. Okay, I'm going to stop there and then I'll ask you guys some questions. So that was like a really, I don't know, do you guys like that piece or not really?
I like the
Like,
part about the food.
I like food too, yeah. Um, Let me full screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, um, whether or not you like it or dislike it, I chose this piece because it was very effective in a couple of ways. So it's a very honest personal narrative, which is something that you'll find yourself writing a lot, especially when maybe you guys have a few years to go, but especially when you're going to college, or writing personal essays, writing your Common App statement. So this is being able to write an essay about yourself is actually really important. And then Scholastic also really likes this type of essay, but also does a really great job of the three things that we talked about, which is writing about theme, writing about motif, and then writing with a distinct voice and style. So let's start off by talking about themes. It should be kind of obvious, but do you guys have any ideas of what themes were kind of present within the text? Family, culture. Yeah, definitely a lot of culture. Family. Okay. Yeah. So, definitely loss. So the main piece is kind of how the main character loses her mother. So it's going to be about loss. And then culture, like Emily said, it's about kind of the culture of food. And then one thing I like about this piece, it's not just like I'm Asian, I'm discovering my culture. It's about how she does that through her mother's death. So it's kind of like how an end acts as another beginning. And then So yeah, these were the two things that I themes that I thought were present the most, which were loss, and then family and mother specifically, and then culture is also a really big one. So one interesting dynamic we see throughout the piece, and this is kind of part of the motif idea, is that is how her mother is passing away. She also loses an interest in and love for food, as we see at the beginning of the piece. And then another aspect is how she uses food to connect back with her mother. So it's really talking about family and how family can come together even when they're not physically together. Even when, especially a focus on motherhood and the importance of mothers, whether in Asian culture or other cultures, and kind of how they nurture someone, whether it's through food or other means. And then loss, definitely the relationship between kind of the child and mom's culture. And I think she explored an area of culture that's often explored in a very interesting way, the area between kind of trying to keep your culture while also moving into a new culture. And then for our motif, basically food is the motif, right? And why is it important as it is? How does it accomplish its effect? And then how does it show its themes? So food really brings together people from different cultures. When she was younger, her dad ate kind of American food, and then her mom ate Korean food. So it really plays into comparing and contrasting these two cultures, right? And I really like um, how at the beginning of a piece, a lot of the focus is on the end, but the beginning is also very important. So what we see from the beginning is that food kind of acts as a unifying force, and we see that with her family. But she also does that at the end of the story, so it repeats itself. First, at the beginning, it's used to kind of unite her family when she was younger, and then afterward, it unites herself. Her not necessarily with anyone in particular, but it helps her come to terms with who she is today after her mother. Who does she become, essentially? And then one really interesting thing that I noticed, and this is the idea of having these tiny objects within food. So, like I kind of talked about a few classes ago, you really want to make your motif very specific and almost like small. So the idea is that like the more small or kind of inconsequential seeming that an object or motif is, the more likely it'll be more significant, and then readers will actually remember it. So, for example, you don't want to say like this is a really bad example, but if you were to say beauty, like you don't want to say something abstract like beauty. You want to say something very specific, like maybe a Q-tip or something, like a very small object that can be used as a symbol to represent something greater. I don't know what's on Allie's screen. There's a bunch of emojis. But yeah, so one interesting thing I noticed is that she has these very tiny objects or like small things or small things she focuses on within her food. So more specifically, she talks about kimchi, right? And that's kind of a huge symbol of Korean culture. And then she also talks more specifically about the idea of fermentation. So what I really liked about that is that it's more of like a subtle idea within a larger food idea. But essentially, fermentation takes time to grow, right? It takes time to recover. And there are a lot of really great food related details. For example, she says, like, I can never make the dishes taste the same as my mother's, and that's okay. And that really alludes to the idea that it's okay to lose things because even if you don't get it back, you'll be okay. And you'll have something kind of new in place. And then another one I wanted to talk about briefly is like media and TV portrayal. So this essay is mostly isolated to the author's life, but it also sometimes acts on a broader scale, right? It refers to stereotypes and kind of outside perceptions on food. So by referring to these, she makes it clear that she's defining the culture for herself and she's kind of seeking out her culture for herself. And then thumbs up or thumbs down. Did you guys think that this piece was supposed to be really happy or like not happy? It's kind of hard, but like at the end, like, do you think she's like happy or like really sad?
Mm, I think it's supposed to be happy and sort of sad.
Hmm. Uh, Sad and then happy. Definitely happy. Yeah, so it is supposed to be happy at the end. I think it's more like hopeful. Um, Kind of either way, especially near the beginning, but it's definitely a hopeful piece. And the author is not like I'm lost, like I don't have anything left. The author is kind of hopeful for what they might have in the future, and what's to come. And is this piece very fast paced? I'd say isn't that fast paced. What we really see in this piece is more of that kind of thoughtful reflection, right? The author's thinking about events, as opposed to kind of narrating the action parts. She's more thinking about what happened and then how that shapes her. So it's a lot more reflective than actually action oriented. And then a lot of things happen throughout the piece. But even though a lot of things happen, she kind of manages it to make it somewhat of a short story. It's not super long, and she picks the details to focus on, and she manages to make it, or just make a timeline while also making it so that you really get a few scenes that are really important. And she's not just saying that everything in her life happened when she was younger. She's talking about like when I was younger at my dinner table, how I grew up, how my relationship with food changed, the turning point with her mother, and then her eventually growth and through discovery of a YouTube channel. So let's do a really quick close reading of the final passage. So basically, it says like one night long ago. So not long ago, I had a dream. So the idea of a dream is pretty important because it's referenced earlier in the passage. So before she says that in her dreams of her mother's are always bad because her mother's sick in those dreams, right? So there's kind of a change there. One night long, not long ago, I had a dream. And then I was watching my mother as she stuffed giant heads of Napa cabbages into earthenware jars. So number one, food again, the Napa cabbages. And then number two, there's this idea of giant, so like large in size, right? And when she was talking about loss earlier, she was really talking about how something was like shriveled away and decayed. So this idea of like generosity of like large, that actually creates a very large contrast. And then finally, I think this is what I like most. There's kind of a sentence break here, right? And then they go into a very short sentence. So this first sentence is like two whole lines, right? And then the next sentence goes into basically half a line. She looked happy and beautiful. And notice how she's not saying anything like super direct, like I learned to come to terms with my mother, or like I can see my old mother after what happened, right? It's a very short sentence, but it's really effective because number one, there's a sentence break right between the two parts, which kind of puts emphasis on it. And then number two is that there's a short line versus long line kind of contrast, which is also putting emphasis on that last line. And finally, she doesn't have to say that much for you to kind of already think about what she's thinking because she's already done the job of creating the contrast, and then the rest of the idea is implied. So she's been able to kind of move on and see her mother in a new light. Okay, so that's basically it for today's lesson. I hope you guys enjoyed. But for homework, you'll be reading three poems from Amanda Gorman's Call Us What We Carry. And they're kind of longer poems, so I only assigned three. One of them is called Good Grief, so that's kind of a grief poem. And then some context for this collection is that Gorman wrote this during the pandemic, so there's a lot of kind of pandemic poems. And then a lot of poems in her collection kind of surround the themes of isolation and what it's like to kind of lose things during the pandemic. So what you guys will be doing for homework is kind of remembering the tree that we talked about. So you'll be writing on and kind of reflecting on the author's style while writing a 150 word question response, answering these questions on the right. And basically, what you're trying to state is who is this? Like they were born here, their family history is this. And then, for example, if you research a bit, you learn that Amanda Gorman had a speech impediment when she was young, and her mother was an English teacher. So you might want to say how that could shape her writing. And then, how did their work become known? Well, she won the Lynn Arson Award at Young Arts. And she's also National Youth Poet Laureate. So I don't know if you guys, we can find, yeah, I will post all this in the Google Classroom. Don't worry. But yeah, so she also, I don't know if you guys know, but she performed at Joe Biden's inaugural speech. So that was like a pretty big thing as well that kind of helped her become more famous. And then finally, why is their work meaningful? And I think that's definitely the most important part. So just say what makes the work special to people, like what elements, what techniques, maybe even the themes, just like we talked about author identity. Um, so yeah, that'll be about 150 words, and a little less or a little more is fine, of course. And then we'll be doing what we did during class, like choosing one theme, one motif, and a general stylistic approach. So what tone you want, and then you'll kind of state these at the top of your homework document, and then you'll write like a short story, either 300 to 500 word short story or a 30 to 40 line poem. And then keep in mind, don't choose poem just because it kind of sounds easier. Choose for the one you prefer more. So if you really like short stories, you can go for the short story. If you're kind of starting out with poetry and you want to experiment with poetry, you can try out that. Um, and if you need any theme suggestions, I'll also include a bunch in the Google Classroom as well. Um, yeah, I can give you the code. Um, But okay, if you need any, yeah, so if you need any theme suggestions, I'll give you some in the Google Classroom. And then you can also reference the story, Popcorn Story we just read. That's Michelle Zauner's story or any of the other stories that we've read for homework. So let me quickly get the Google Classroom theme. Um, but yeah, and if you guys, I don't think, okay. I have an opportunity slide, but I don't have any opportunities for you guys this week. But of course, if you ever are submitting to any literary competitions or competitions and you want me to look it over or look anything over, I'd be happy to do that. You can just email me, or just like put a comment on the Google Classroom. Um, okay. So I just put in the chat the Google Classroom theme. But otherwise, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you guys enjoyed this class. And if there's anything else you guys want to tell me or you want my help with, just feel free to let me know. But that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Bye bye.